some 2-5-1s from Chick Corea. And what's kind of interesting about them is often a lot of times when you learn or hear 2-5-1s, they're playing a lot of chord tones. And maybe because he's a keyboard player, he can get away with playing the actual chord in his left hand. He's using subs on these, which horn players and guitar players, you don't always hear that. A lot of times, like I said, you hear the root chords being outlined. So, and they're also kind of sequences, which is kind of cool, but we'll look at that in a second. So the first one goes like this. So the first chord is a D minor 7. Whoops. So the first part is just this, which is an A minor chord. You know, an A minor triad, which is 5 on the B string, 7 on the D string, 5 on the G string. And then the next part he plays. So that other note is actually the 11th. But that's your first, that's over the D. So he's not playing, which would be outlining a D minor chord. He's outlining an A minor chord, which, so it's a cool substitution that's going on. Then the next thing he does is, when you go to the G7 chord, this first little part right here, 7 to 7 on the 3rd string there, then down the 3rd string, and then back to the 4th string on the 5th fret. He's outlining a G major arpeggio, which is within your G7 chord. Then he plays this, and I fingered it this way because really the next lick is in the higher position, and that's the only reason. You could have gone could have fingered it like this. But that's going to put you back behind the pattern, which is fine if you're going to chop these up. You probably really should learn it that way too, but kind of figured this, which might be odd for some of you. 1 on the 5th string, 5th fret 3rd, then your pinky up on the 9th, 4th, 7th. Both of those two notes are on your 4th, and then this is on your 5th. So then your next, when you land, is going to be, the next part outlines the major chord. So that whole little fret, the whole lick goes. Then the next one, and I took these, they're pretty close together. In the cycle of chords, there were a couple other chords in there. The funny thing was he kind of plays these straight eighths, which are sequenced, kind of like that. You could hear the sequence in. So they're a little more of like a scale sequence, although they're not like a shred. He's not doing thirds or fourths straight up a pattern. But every time the 2/5 came around in the song, which is, like I said, there's only a couple chords in between it, he was playing these type of ideas. So anyway, so the second one goes like this. The second one goes like this. And this is really over just the 2 and the 5. He sticks the landing for the last note over the C. But this first part is really, he's playing a F major 7 arpeggio. Which is what this is. And then he's adding a 9th. And it's a nice little sequence there. And then when you go to the G chord, he's basically playing a triad. He's playing an F major triad. So he's just played an F major 7 arpeggio. Now he's going to play an F major triad, but he basically starts it with a note from the scale, plays the arpeggio, and then comes down the scale. Like I said, he winds up on that E note. That's right on the downbeat of the 1 chord. So you got. And one thing I will say, a lot of times with, even Eric Johnson does this, when they're playing, if they start to play a sequence that's an obvious sequence, it's often started with a pickup phrase, which is kind of what he does here. Then he goes up the arpeggio. Anyway, there's a whole lot. If you were to sit down and learn these ideas all over your fretboard, and move them through your scale patterns and through the scales, which he kind of does in the first one here. He starts to moving that little pattern. You can get a lot of mileage out of. It's 2 simple little 2/5/1 licks, but there's an awful lot of things that could be mined and really turned into a lot of information on the fretboard. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next week.